discuss Elon Musk's Neuralink and his new presentation / announcement of what they've been working on with their consumer brain-to-computer interface device that's going to save humanity from artificial intelligence taking over and killing us all by us becoming symbiotic with it by putting an interface into our actual brain.
And ultimately to help secure humanity's future as a civilization relative to AI. I do want to emphasize that it's not going to be like suddenly Neuralink will have this incredible neural lace and start taking over people's brains. Okay? It will take a long time.
You would think by now I'd be over the shock. I'd be over the phase of making jokes about science fiction movies coming true and warning people of the dystopian nature of the future that's being built here. But I'm still not over it. And that's even after 3.5 years of research into the film The Minds of Men, which I feel like I've now seen the film we made is now being turned into the punchline of a bad joke on all of humanity. That's kind of how I feel when I'm watching Elon Musk's Neuralink presentation, which most of you probably have heard that Neuralink broke their silence after several years and has come out now to present the plan of how they're going to normalize and commercialize brain-computer interfaces and bring those to the public.
I feel like this is the big new myth for the coming age. They really want to get people on the grid in the most personal, intimate kind of way by having their brain controlled by an electronic device. And this is the greatest or the worst sales pitch of all time.
Meaning that we can ultimately, this is going to sound pretty weird, but achieve a sort of symbiosis with artificial intelligence.
Aaron and I sat through and watched this, and we're just going to play a few clips from this. You put a link, you can go watch the whole hour and 45 minutes for yourself if you really want to subject yourself to it. It took us a while to watch this and make this video because we knew going in this was going to be extremely depressing. And even with someone like Elon Musk selling it to you, it's still extremely depressing. In fact, maybe more so considering how many times he made jokes and laughed about it.
And I haven't met anyone who wants to get rid of either the cortex or the limbic system. Because like everything's got robust electronics and algorithms at this point. But not threads. I feel like I'm in Transcendence. I was in Transcendence.
And the jokes aren't funny.
It's basically Bluetooths to your phone. Because we'll have to watch the App Store updates for that one. Make sure we don't have a driver issue. Updating.
And the laughter's creepy.
So the
I mean, at one point he even makes this joke. It's not like we're just going to have this neural lace and start taking over people's brains.
So I do want to emphasize that it's not going to be like suddenly Neuralink will have this incredible neural lace and start taking over people's brains. Okay? It will take a long time. And you'll see it coming.
The guy obviously thinks this is extremely funny.
For the record, he is my favorite techno overlord.
I feel like I'm in Transcendence. I was in Transcendence.
I think it's really alarming the way that this is being rolled out. Elon Musk has been saying now for years that AI is going to turn us all into pets. And so because it's going to be so super intelligent, we're going to be like ants or cats or whatever to the AI.
If you have ultra intelligent AI, we would be so far below them in intelligence that it would be like, a pet, basically.
Cat, that's what I was thinking.
Like a pet.
Cat,
Like a cat. It'd be
Elon
like
the
a house cat. Yeah, it would be like the house cat.
We have to symbiotically merge ourselves with it to make ourselves worthy of having our lives spared, I guess, by this all-knowing AI that we're creating. It's like, oh, we built this thing, it could destroy everything. Sorry about that, guys, but hey, if you don't want to get destroyed, better put this stuff inside of your brain and merge with it.
But I think even in a benign AI scenario, we will be left behind. And so, hopefully it is a benign scenario, but I think with a high bandwidth brain-machine interface, I think we can actually go along for the ride. And we can effectively have the option of merging with AI.
You see the problem reaction solution of this situation? It's ridiculous.
It's exactly a false choice. It's a Hegelian dialectic false problem with a phony solution to synthesize something that people would have never just outright chosen, which is to put something in your brain that basically has an electronic microchip component.
Yeah, he's talking about having read-write access to your brain through electrodes.
You remember a couple years ago, it was frequently a headline that artificial intelligence is becoming too dangerous. And then people were surprised when even Bill Gates and Elon Musk said, yep, AI is too dangerous. We're going to have to do something. And they agreed it was this huge danger. They didn't say what they were going to do yet. But then more and more, if you paid attention to Elon Musk's comments, he has the solution. He'd like to know if someone has a better solution, of course.
I think that's the best outcome. I hope so. If anybody's got better ideas, I'd love to hear it.
The solution would be to merge our brains with AI and create a digital, electronic, artificial, synthetic consciousness that would effectively merge us with AI. It's a false choice on the idea that AI is going to be so dangerous and so out of control that the best thing we can do to protect ourselves against it is to proactively become the very danger that could destroy us. It's kind of strange. It's very unsettling when you see it for what it is.
And that's the argument that we've been hearing now for over 2 years, coming from the likes of Musk and all these other tech guys. But that is not how they started the presentation. How they start the presentation is by saying they're actually building this because they just really want to cure neurological disorders.
I think unless we have some sort of brain-machine interface that can solve brain ailments of all kinds, whether it's an accident or congenital, we can solve that with a chip. And this is something that I think most people don't quite understand yet.
He opens up this presentation by making it sound like what he's really interested in now is helping people who have neurological issues, like they're paralyzed and stuff like that, which is not something he has ever mentioned before in any of the times that he has talked about Neuralink or Neuralace that I've ever seen. And the way that he talks about it here is like it's basically just this afterthought hurdle they have to go through in order to get it officially approved. And then once it's approved, it can then be used for the other reasons.
Getting FDA approval for implantable or devices of any kind is quite difficult. And this will be a slow process where we will gradually increase the issues that we solve until ultimately we can do a full brain-machine interface.
But it comes across as just being an obvious thing they have to say they're doing in order for them to get FDA approval of a new medical device like this. Now we can move on to just giving this electively to people who don't have those issues.
So in the limit, after solving a bunch of brain-related diseases, there is the existential, it's mitigation of the existential threat of AI. This is the point of it.
Yep, it's a ploy, and we came across this again and again in the Minds of Men film, as far back as Wilder Penfield, and what he was doing at the Montreal Neurological Institute. It was all based supposedly on dealing with epilepsy, because there was no better treatment, so they may as well open people's brains and experiment. Dr. Penfield conducted, quote, treatments of last resort.
It has been necessary to operate on a good many men and women, good many hundreds, and to expose the brain under local anesthesia with the patient conscious.
For Penfield, these risky experimental surgeries were worth it. He was creating what was known as the homunculus, a veritable map for the outer cortex, and a code towards understanding the inner workings of the brain.
But it was under the guise of trying to help people and just having a poke around while they're in there helping people. And it's a camel's nose under the tent. That's what they've been doing throughout all these years. But this time it's obvious and it's admitted up front.
And we hope to have this aspirationally in a human patient before the end of next year. So this is not far.
Because we have Elon Musk talking about this neural lace, Neuralink technology for years before, when they were just simply talking about merging people's consciousness with technology. And then after the fact, him saying, well, we need FDA approval.
So the why of Neuralink, just to go over it, is I think it's important for us to address brain-related diseases.
And it looks like it could probably help with some neurological disorders. So yeah, it's for neurological disorders. Oh, and we want to transform people and make them hybrid technology entities.
And this is something I think that's going to be really important at a civilization level scale. So
through this entire presentation, it's pretty obvious that the point they're really trying to get across doesn't have anything to do with curing people who have neurological disorders. The point they're trying to make for an hour and 45 minutes, aside from just trying to educate society at all on the basics of how their brains even work, since we live in a society where it's kind of strange that it's one of the most important organs you have in your entire body, and yet as a public we're woefully ignorant on the basics of how our own brains actually work, is to really assuage people that it's just going to be really tiny. They say this, how tiny these electrodes are going to be over and over and over, to the point that it almost becomes like a joke.
So they're extremely tiny threads, about a tenth roughly of the cross-sectional area of a human hair. This is how tiny the threads are, extremely, extremely small. It's so small you can't really even see it in the picture with the penny. They're all very, very tiny. Threads are very tiny.
Or if it was a drinking game, you'd probably die of alcohol poisoning.
And then you really need this to be done with a robot, because it's very tiny. And this is what the robot looks like. It all comes down to a very tiny, tiny point. But in fact, the actual needle that gets inserted is way, way tinier. That little tiny thing where the arrow is pointing.
If you took a drink every time, they said how tiny this is going to be and how non-invasive it's going to be.
If you're going to go stick something in your brain, you want it to not be giant, you want it to be tiny.
Not to belabor the point, I know that Elon really hammered this in, but these things are very, very small.
You won't notice it. That's the important part. You won't it's, you won't feel a thing.
So he says, and some other people that he brings up on stage talk about how this is going to be like just having LASIK or something.
But our aim is to simplify the procedure. A painless opening in the skull below, quick and precise placement of threads into the cortex, no big scars, no hospital stays, no short procedures. No hospital stays, very short procedures.
This instead is going to be a robot inserting all of these electrodes into people's brains that are tinier than the width of a human hair, and then a chip.
This is what the chip looks like.
It's actually going to be a chip in your brain.
This is a photo of some of the prototypes that we've gone through.
And if you've seen The Minds of Men, they've been inserting electrodes since at least the 1960s and leaving them in there for years at a time. But there's been a lot of cases where it's caused brain damage, hemorrhaging, destruction certainly of individual neurons and tissue areas and stuff. So it's not without its dangers. They claim they've rectified this now, but keep in mind they said that stuff was safe at the time.
One of the things that really creeped me out watching this is just how they're going to start doing this surgery, and how easy and painless and seemingly not a big deal they're going to try and make this for everyone. Because that was one of the main arguments, going back to The Minds of Men, that was made time and again about this technology when it did come out to the public, was just that it's such an invasive surgery. It takes highly trained neuroscientists to perform this surgery. They can't just, this isn't something they can just abuse and widespread do to people.
It's labor intensive. It's
they made these arguments over and over.
They could never do it to the whole population.
It could never be done to everyone. And they said that again in the 70s when all the revelations came out. They were saying that kind of stuff. And so they've taken that criticism, and now all these years later, they've created a procedure that is going to be done by a robot. It will be overseen by a neuroscientist, but it's going to be performed by robots. And they were talking about how they've designed a new robot specifically to put these tiny electrodes into people's brains. It's going to be like an outpatient thing. It's just going to require a local anesthetic. It's not going to be that big of a deal at all. So they've taken that one argument as to how this couldn't be abused or misused, and they've thrown that out the window because they're going to scale this up with robots performing this surgery all over the place. It's going to be a very simple procedure. And on top of that, it reminds me of something that Dr. Robert G. Heath out of New Orleans, who did unethical experimentation for the military. He's tied to the MK Ultra experimentation. And we actually played a clip of him in the film where he was interviewed for the media, and he said something like, well, I don't see how it could be abused or misused. The control for the stimulation of the brain is in the patient's hands.
There's no way that I can see that it could be abused or misused. If the patient doesn't want to stimulate himself, he doesn't stimulate himself. The control is in his hands.
But some people fear that the control won't stay in the patient's hands.
This is going to be wirelessly connected to a phone app.
For our first patients, we're looking at four sensors, 3 in motor areas and 1 in a somatosensory area, which are connected via very small wires tunneled under the scalp to an inductive coil behind the ear. And that connects wirelessly through the skin to a wearable device that we call the Link, which contains a Bluetooth radio and a battery. It'll be controlled through an iPhone app. You won't have to go to a doctor's office and have them have an exotic programmer to configure it.
I mean, how many times have we been told, not just that back doors are built into all of this technology, we've been told that over and over again, not just with Snowden leaks and WikiLeaks and all the stuff that came out by the CIA, but we've been told time and again that anything connected to the internet can be hacked, anything. So why would anyone right there want to connect their brain to anything like that, knowing that that's even remotely a possibility? And Musk even makes these jokes. He makes jokes and he's laughing and making jokes throughout this entire presentation. And one of the jokes he makes is that it's so funny, right? Because this is just hilarious. One of the jokes he makes has to do with how it's not going to be used for ads, because that would be really unethical, because there's nothing you could do to stop it at that point. Yeah, because it's in your brain.
No, there's no advertising.
I mean, Jesus. I mean, you'd have really no escape. We cannot do that. That would be ethical barrier.
Yeah, I mean, what came out in the 60s and 70s alarmed people so much that you had newspapers and TV programs asking the questions about mind control, and they tried to allay people's fears and soothe them and say, yes, but it's never going to happen. Well, they didn't lose interest in the brain. They wouldn't lose interest in the brain. And so all the advances in technology since then have unsurprisingly allowed tinier and tinier applications in dealing with the brain, have allowed more precision and greater technological invasion. And even at the time in the 60s and 70s, while Heath was downplaying the risks to society, he was fully aware that Dr. Delgado was just up the road using a remote control to electronically remotely stimulate the brains of his experimental subjects, some of which were primates, some of which were humans.
Yeah, and Musk and people like him are selling this to everyone as if this is just going to be this amazing device that's basically going to make people have superhero-like powers.
I think it's safe to say you could repay the loan with superhuman intelligence. I think it's a safe bet.
I know Kung Fu.
So in a society where we've been inundated with superhero movies, I mean, there's a new superhero movie out seemingly every month now, But we've been inundated with these movies for years and years. Now you have people coming out and saying, oh, you want to be a superhero? Here's how you can do it. Just put this thing in your brain.
If two people had a neural link, you'd be able to effectively have a sort of really high bandwidth telepathy.
So you'll have telepathy, you'll have super intelligence. I mean, it's just all these promises of how we're going to be basically like Superman if we put this thing in our brain. And I think people are going to eat that up.
We're talking about humanity becoming like the gods. What do you think?
Despite the fact that we don't even understand fully how our brains do some of the things that our brains do. Science acts like they know everything about the brain, but they actually don't. And that's despite all of this unethical experimentation going back all of these decades, which is what this new technology is being built off the back of.
Because it has infinite complexity, and even the most hardcore promoters of science don't pretend that they at all understand the spirit, the mind, the so-called soul, that what little they do know about the brain mechanism still doesn't get them all that much closer to the soul, but they're very good at controlling attitude and emotion and behavior, and that's enough to sort of corral people into things. And the other tool that they've had in their bag for a while is the feedback loop of approval or disapproval, the punishment and pain aspect. They've proven pretty effective already on platforms like Facebook and other internet social media platforms that they can nudge your behavior, they can get you to talk about or not talk about certain aspects, they can drive your happiness or your sadness through suggestive messages. And when that's all happening in a streamlined fashion in the brain being transmitted, it's going to contribute to groupthink and approved thoughts. It's going to make it harder and harder to think independently, especially if that independent thought disagrees with the mainstream conglomerate, the emerging hiveborg that they're building.
I mean, that's already happening now just with the censorship that's going on. You've seen how people on YouTube have said they're censoring themselves because of it. And that's before we get to a point like this. But the other thing is how the people he brings up on stage discuss this technology. Because they talk about how your reality is basically, in their view, just action potentials.
Everything that you perceive, feel, hear, think, it's all action potentials. It's all it's neural spikes. And it feels so real. It feels very real.
Because it's this hardcore scientific materialist view of things. So everything that is your reality is based only on your signals to your brain and the action potentials that your brain fires off. And so all your memories, your emotions, your thoughts, et cetera, will be accessed in this way.
Our algorithms can compress neural data by more than 200 times, and it only takes 900 nanoseconds to compute, which is faster than the time it takes for the brain to realize it happened.
When you look at something in that way, you're devaluing it, really, because what you're saying is that's all there is. And if that's all there is, then, well, that's not such a big deal. We can just mess with that. I mean, you can just tweak it and change it and stimulate it here and stimulate it there and do whatever. And
so the neuron and electrical pulse is a neuron. It just thinks it's a neuron. And it's going to, for sure, adapt dynamically because it just sees electrical pulses and it's going to respond to those.
I don't feel like they really spoke to how that's going to affect people. There was a question at the end, and they didn't give mics to the people asking questions, so they didn't repeat this person's question the way they repeated everyone else's, so there wasn't any way to tell, but based on their answers, you could kind of tell what her question was.
Oh, okay. What's your answer to what do you think we should do? I mean, we're open to ideas here. The overarching objective is to make the future better, aspirationally, and to hopefully not pave the road to hell with good intentions.
And she asked something about what's going to happen in a world where you are erasing challenges, people's neurological issues, possibly pain, how that's going to change people, because going through some of these painful things is part of what makes us human. It's part of what makes us understand, like pain, having pain is part of what makes you understand how good it is to not have pain, things like that, like on a very base level. And she asked a question regarding that kind of stuff, and his answer was...
I think that it's a big philosophical question. What will... It's hard to say what the future will be with something like this brain-machine interface. I doubt that we would be able to eliminate all suffering, and it actually may be ultimately oddly dystopian if we do eliminate all suffering. That actually may not be a true utopia. There's like generally like stories about utopia tend to turn into dystopia.
But the truth is that you're going to change people regardless. Like if you're affecting people's brains, which is the place where you take in sense data and turn it into the reality that you see largely. If you're going to be editing that and mediating it through this device, then you're going to be changing that person's reality. I mean, that's just basic. There are articles that have come out of people who have had deep brain electrodes permanently placed in their brain for long periods of time, and they say they don't feel human anymore after a while. There are people who have come out and said that it makes them feel robotic. It makes them unable to tell if emotions and feelings and behaviors that they have are really, truly theirs anymore. And so they lose their sense of personal identity because they don't even know anymore if why they're doing something is truly based on their own motivation.
It feels like we've already grown up in a world that's plastic and corporate and has little rubber stamped tiny houses everywhere with 100 major corporations, and the idea that that's just going to get worse and worse, I don't know. It's disconnected from reality in a certain sense, but that's almost kind of the point. I think they want to create a highly, highly artificial world. They're
saying that the next big platforms of computing are going to be voice-run platforms. They're going to be VR and augmented reality platforms. And then you talk about plugging things literally into your brain that are mediating the sense data coming into your brain. You have read-write access. That's how they're actually saying it now. We're to the point where they just are openly, blatantly stating that this is what these devices are going to do. They're going to have a robot that is going to insert all of these tiny electrodes into the brain tissue, sew it in there like a robotic sewing machine, just sewing these little things into your brain. And then that is going to enable a wireless read-write access into your mind.
I'm entirely creeped out that after doing research, even 20 years ago when I had basically just read Ray Kurzweil, it was evident that they had planned for a man-machine symbiosis all along, and they were just waiting for it to become sophisticated enough to have a direct input-output, which is the exact terminology Elon Musk uses over and over.
The thing that will ultimately constrain our ability to be symbiotic with AI is bandwidth, the input and output speed.
For him, it's about the bandwidth speed of input into the human brain and output from the human brain, which right now he keeps reminding us is limited by our thumbs typing on a phone or even a keyboard, not fast enough to keep up, but they're working on that, and they've been working towards it for decades. It's so creepy that this plan has been long-term and extremely methodical and premeditated, but you have these CEOs and these salesmen like Elon Musk acting like they just thought of it last Wednesday.
It's just something I came up with a couple years ago.
Right now, just let us know if you have a better idea. If you have a better idea, I'd love to hear it. Oh, come on by.
As if this isn't something they've been working on and testing on people for 60 plus years. It's insulting, actually. The way they talk to everyone about their own brain is insulting.
It's the most severe form of synthesis out of thesis and antithesis I could think
ever. Yeah.
It's just such a false pretense to act like, well, what else can we do?
What else? I don't know. Well, yeah, exactly.
It's just such a danger.
It's just so dangerous. Put things in your brain. I mean, he came out on stage and this time he straight up said, you already have this brain computer interface. It is your cell phone.
We can have a tertiary layer, which is the kind of a digital superintelligence layer. And in fact, you already have this layer. So it's your phone and your laptop. And the constraint is just how well you interface the input and output speed.
In essence, what he's saying is the same thing we've been saying for a really long time, that this is the gradual moving us towards this technology. First, they give you a computer. It's in a box on your desktop. It seems like a tool separate from you.
This is an experimental computer system that recognizes what I say.
But then they have the internet, and it becomes more invasive. It starts to become something that's worked its way into everyday life.
You'll learn how the net can entertain you and take you to far-off locations and meet new people.
If you want to exist in this society, it's really hard to do it without an email address and being connected to the internet. Then those things become smaller and smaller until they become a phone in your hand. And now all your communication is merged together in one small device that you carry around. And then they tried to get wearables going with Google Glass, and everyone thought that looked really stupid, so they weren't able to just immediately go to that as fast as they would have liked. I think that actually put them behind on schedule with this stuff. But you have seen that the computers have gotten smaller and smaller. They're becoming wearables. People are talking to them now on their counters in their kitchen with the Alexa Echo devices and the Google Homes and Siri and all this kind of stuff. And it's just becoming more and more invasive until it gets closer and closer to your person, until eventually it goes inside of your person. As you develop more and more of a relationship with this technology, they're just making it more and more invasive. And that's what we're seeing here. He even made a joke about the movie Transcendence as if it's funny.
And here's the thing we learn about cybernetics and the idea of cyborgs, the cybernetic organism. Technically, it's a question of man, people in general, not a gender, man and his environment, which would reflect the natural environment as well as everything that's been built and shown on TV and everything else. But at its heart, it's just man and the environment. But as you augment the senses, as you use prosthesis, as they carry out plans they've talked about to jack in a video feed from some electronic camera and bypass your optical nerve and trick the brain into thinking that video feed is what the eye is seeing, as they're talking about hearables that augment the hearing and drown out voices you don't want to hear and amplify things you are interested in hearing. You're talking about a world that's technologically and artificially mediated. And if that's not the Matrix telling you that some nasty gruel tastes like chicken, I don't know what is. They're talking about a world where a tiny handful of technological controllers, perhaps sitting in Silicon Valley, could single-handedly change our reality in a very real, binding, and consequential kind of way. That's where cybernetics heads, towards a world that is, for all intents and purposes, artificial, because the natural pre-existing world has been drowned out, has been overlaid, has been augmented and obscured. And there's plenty of dangers in that. And they're just guiding us into it like naive sheep, telling us how great it's going to be and telling us it's going to be an entertainment party with no consequences. Well, this is a place where they can steer thought, where they can approve thoughts, where unapproved information is deleted forever. And we've already begun to see that.
That's how television was meant to work. That's why they called it programming. When you watch something on TV, you were meant to look at that screen as if you were looking out at the world through the screen as your eyeballs. But the thing is with the TV, you can turn it off. When you're done watching it, you turn it off, you walk away. I guess they're saying with this, you'll just be able to take this earpiece thing off or turn off the phone app or whatever you're going to do, but you're still going to have these things in your brain. I didn't see him say a single thing, or any of the other people that got up on stage and talked. I didn't see any of them say anything about how that is going to be completely secure and non-accessible by anyone else but you, especially if it's something you're accessing through a cell phone app. This thing is going to have read-write access to your brain. And if you don't like it, you can't just take it out. So great. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I didn't think this was very funny. I thought it was incredibly, incredibly disturbing. I think the way they're going about it with all this getting FDA approval because they want to cure people of things is just really disingenuous at best. And the rest of it, they're going to get to people through their want to be these gods that we've been promised. All this technology is going to turn us into gods. So you have all these people that are just frothing at the mouth to become gods through technology because they've programmed everyone to think that that's what's going to happen. But they've also got people thinking that if they don't, they're going to become pets. So either way, they've got all these people buying into this belief that the next logical progression of our technology is to put it in our brains.
That's it. They're promising godlike powers, and people who've been worried about the mark of the beast, who've seen it coming in this technological world, I mean, the red line for a long time has been putting something in your brain. And it seemed like it might be an RFID chip 10 and 20 years ago. Today, this seems even more likely. And the question is, why would you go blindly into the night and assume that these people have good intentions? Because even if they do have good intentions, it seems fraught with disaster and a loss of personal sovereignty. Either way, it doesn't look pretty. I wouldn't want to be a part of it pretty much at all under any circumstances.
That just reminds me, he also volunteered the idea that this won't be mandatory.
But this is not a mandatory thing. This is a thing that you can choose to have if you want. And
I thought that was extremely, extremely creepy, where he just came out and said it's not going to be. No one said they thought it was going to be mandatory. No one in the audience raised their hand and said, hey, Elon, are you going to go around forcing this chip and these electrodes into people's brains? Like, no one said that. But he volunteered that it's not going to be, that you're going to have to choose it. Just like it's like saying when the vampire comes to your house and knocks on the door, you're going to have to invite it in. I mean, no one said that. No one assumed that, but he volunteered that it won't be mandatory.
This is not a mandatory thing.
It's a creepy thing to volunteer, but it's like magically they would get more power from people choosing it or electing it rather than having it forced upon them.
I mean, why did he even feel the need to tell people that it's not going to be mandatory? Obviously, he must realize that there's obviously people who are going to be concerned about that because it's staring everyone right in the face what this is.
I know you've all been watching the Twilight Zone episodes in the lobby. It won't be mandatory. We're not trying to control your brain. You'll see it coming.
You'll see it coming.
Great.
That's the other thing he said.
I do want to emphasize that it's not going to be like suddenly Neuralink will have this incredible neural lace and start taking over people's brains. Okay, it will take a long time. And you'll see it coming.
Because it's going to take a while because they have to go through all this FDA hoops, which is why obviously they're saying they want to cure all these people with these brain. Here's the other thing.
We're going to cure all diseases and give lots of Bitcoin to everyone who takes it.
In the limit, after solving a bunch of brain-related diseases, there is the existential. It's mitigation of the existential threat of AI.
It's not just Elon Musk and it's not just Neuralink. It's Facebook and other big tech platforms that are coming out talking about how they're going to read your brain and all this stuff. Facebook right now, it just came out in MIT Technology Review, an update on the Facebook brain experiments. Don't you think it's interesting that all of these tech corporations are moving towards brain experiments and putting things in people's brains? So now Facebook has been doing research, and supposedly this is on volunteers. They're developing speech decoders. They're doing research on people who have epilepsy, people who are undergoing brain surgery for epilepsy, trying to read and decode the thoughts from their brains without them speaking. They're also working on systems that listen to the brain from outside the skull using fiber optics or lasers to measure changes in blood flow and try to read information from that to read people's thoughts. And once again, you had this lady from Duke, Nita Farahany, who was at the Davos meeting talking about this. And once again, she's being interviewed or at least quoted in this MIT Review article about how the brain is the one safe place for freedom of thought, fantasies, and dissent. And she says, quote, "We're getting close to crossing the final frontier of privacy in the absence of any protections whatsoever, because once again, they have not baked in protections for people's right to privacy in their own mind. They're calling it cognitive liberty, and it's almost like they just came up with that phrase so that they could then say we don't have any." We're on the precipice of them talking about implanting all these electrodes in people's brains. Facebook is trying to come up with this thing despite the fact that they just got hit with a $5 billion fine for deceiving Facebook users about how their personal information is getting used on the platform. Why would anyone trust them to put something on or in their head that's going to read their thoughts? And why are they acting like this is just the natural, normal progression of technological evolution, that we should just cozy up to these corporations who make money off of our data and let them inside of our brains?
Well, because technology's always been about conquering nature, and they've developed different ways of dealing with climate, producing crops using technology. They've intervened in different parts of the body. They have artificial lungs and artificial hearts, but the brain has still been elusive, and the mind much more elusive. And it's still the final frontier. It's the big final mystery of the reality that we inhabit. And so they want to conquer it. It's going to be their long-term goal. And they want people to think that they have a handle on it and that it's inevitable.
It took us a while to get to this. Like we didn't even really want to watch it at first because we knew how it was going to make us feel, just based on everything we've already researched and everything. But then actually watching it and realizing this is where a lot of that research was always headed, to a place like this, and knowing all of the ways, not even all of the ways, I won't say all of the ways, but knowing a lot of the ways that this can be abused, misused, it can go wrong, it has gone wrong in the past. I guess I hope they've learned from their mistakes, but this is going to change people. This is going to really change people forever. This is not an elective procedure like, oh, Brad's mom is going to go get breast implants. Hope she likes the way she looks now, because if she doesn't, she can always just get them taken out. This is your brain. This is not the same. I don't care if they make it into a procedure that's like getting an infected toenail removed and you could just do it on an outpatient basis. This is your brain.
Well, that's the thing. The direction is clear and it's alarming, and society still has to make a choice. We could choose not to go in this direction, but we're being literally herded to a pre-fenced area. We're being shoved down a bowling lane where there's gutters and borders to it. And, you really got to go against the current to say no to this in a positive way. And we're reaching the point where society is becoming a moth to flame. It's going to be our undoing and our potential destruction, and yet we see it as alluring, and we're moving as fast as we can towards it, and seemingly no rational voices are urging a cautionary tone at all. Everyone's just acting like this guy's the greatest. They literally said in a news clip I saw recently, well, it's going to happen eventually, sooner or later, and he's the guy to do it.
The half human, half computer kind of thing.
The Borg!
We are the Borg.
The Borg, thank you.
Right, yeah.
I mean, do you really want to go there? I understand people want to enhance.
It's going to happen at some point. I mean, and he's the guy to do it.
The Borg!
Really? That's the choice we're supposed to make? We do have the power to say no to this. The question is, why are we letting ourselves be magnetically drawn towards a personality promising us false powers of God?
If they continue to change and upgrade and edit the way that we interface with this technology, and say in 20 years it's not a keyboard anymore, now in 20 years you pretty much have to have a brain-computer interface, that's the only way you're going to do it. If they make that into the way that technology interfaces with people, if that's the way that they claim everything is headed, and this is just the way it's going to be and the standard in the future, it's going to be a lot harder for a lot of people to say no and make that choice.
And that's the thing. The mark of the beast isn't mandatory either, but you can't buy or sell
But
without
it sounds like it's going to be incredibly hard to live in society without it if
But
you
if
can't
you
buy or
don't-
sell without it, which is exactly where the technology is headed with this stuff.
You don't have to have it, but if you don't want to be basically an ape to a human, you better get it so you can keep up with technology. That AI sure is going to be smart. There's only one way to keep up with it, to become the AI. It's a weird devil's bargain.
But don't worry, you can choose to have it if you want to. Of course, that choice will only be valid until we get to a society where you can't interface with our technology unless you have it. And it will be incredibly easy once they get a lot of people on board for this to just say, well, that's going to be the new predominant platform. So it's pretty much the elephant in the room, which is why he had to preemptively say, don't worry, it isn't going to be mandatory, because he knows that
it's not mandatory, but the economy's totally screwed, and the only way to get UBI is to use your Neuralink upload with the Bitcoin credits, and they're going to induce people to do it voluntarily to get all the economy into the digital imaginary space and out of individual people's hands. It's a taking away of personal power. It's a destruction of all that's left of the original world, really.
And that's the world that we're looking at now. I mean, that is the cybernetic world that we as a human race are facing. And I don't think people get it. I mean, it may not be 10 years, it may not be 20 years, it might be 30 or 40, but this is where they're taking society, and they're saying this is inevitable, this is where it's all headed, this is the way it's going to be. It really, it insinuates a general ignorance of most people who are even paying attention enough to watch a presentation like this. You're talking about putting something inside your brain. The last bastion of your autonomy and freedom, your brain. You're going to put something in there that's hooked up to these corporations, to this system, so you can hook into Google? Really? I mean, how stupid does that sound when I say it? It sounds really stupid to me.
So, in the limit, after solving a bunch of brain-related diseases, there is the existential, it's mitigation of the existential threat of AI, or yeah, this is the point of it.
What are you going to have to give up as far as your humanity in order to have these, I don't know, it's what sounds to me like a bunch of dinky quote-unquote superpowers that they're promising?
Yeah, the myth is really troubling that people would swallow it and fall for it. And the sad truth is it looks like people would sell their souls for a dime's worth of pleasure in a theme park.
A 2 millimeter incision, which is dilated to 8 millimeters, and then the chip is placed through that, and then it goes back to being 2 millimeters, and you can basically glue it shut. You don't even need a stitch. And then the interface to the chip is wireless, so you have no wires poking out of your head. Very, very important. It's basically Bluetooth to your phone. Because we'll have to watch the App Store updates for that one. Make sure we don't have a driver issue. But I think even in a benign AI scenario, we will be left behind.
A few years ago, Elon Musk told everyone that with AI, we're summoning the demon.
I mean, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon.
And now he's telling everyone that we need to go along for the ride with the demon.
With a high bandwidth brain-machine interface, I think we can actually go along for the ride, and we can effectively have the option of merging with AI. I mean, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, you sure you can control the demon? Didn't work out.